They say the truth will set you free, but they never warn you that freedom can come with the weight of 1,000 bricks. It doesn't soar in like a bird on the wind, it crashes down, brutal and unforgiving. The morning I found the letter was just like any other, which somehow made it worse. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning in early fall. The maple trees outside had just begun their annual ritual of shedding, painting the lawn in hues of amber and fire. The sky was that calm, cloudless blue, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and decaying leaves. Linda had just left to run some errands. I had just poured myself a second cup of coffee, the smell of vanilla creamer still lingering in the kitchen, when I saw the photo album on the table. It wasn't unusual to see it there. Linda loved organizing and reorganizing our memories. She often joked that if she weren't a wife and mother, she'd have been a historian. That morning, something compelled me to open it. Maybe it was nostalgia from the recent anniversary. Maybe it was the chill in the air making me feel older than I was. I flipped the pages slowly. There was our honeymoon in Maui, my hand around Linda's waist, both of us sunburned and beaming. David's first steps, caught in a blur of motion as he toddled toward me. Maria dressed as a fairy princess, beaming with a missing front tooth. The twins, Josh and Jonah, covered in mud from one of their infamous backyard adventures. Lily's 5th birthday, her face smeared with cake as she grinned at the camera. Each picture was a memory, a moment that defined my life. And then, it happened. An envelope slipped out. Yellowed with age, creased at the corners, and addressed in Linda's unmistakable cursive. To Jonathan. My first reaction wasn't dread. It was curiosity. Maybe it was an anniversary love note. Or one of those time capsule letters we used to write and forget about. I smiled at the thought, peeled the envelope open, and unfolded the letter inside. But the moment I read the first line, the smile faded. If you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to tell you myself. I read on, the words sinking into me like ice water. I've lived with this secret for decades. Every day I wanted to tell you. Every day I couldn't. Because I was afraid of losing you, afraid of what it would do to you and to the kids. I'm so sorry, John. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be honest. But none of the children are biologically yours. My hands trembled. The paper rustled. My vision blurred. I dropped the letter on the table as if it burned. What the hell was this? None of them? None. For a moment I thought this had to be a joke. A cruel prank. But the handwriting was real. The voice in those words, it was Linda's. Her phrasing, her guilt, her love. It wasn't fake. I stood up so suddenly the chair scraped against the tile. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. My chest ached, my knees buckled slightly as I stumbled away from the kitchen. I grabbed the envelope again, pacing now. I read the letter a second time. A third. The same horrible truth glared back at me each time. Not David. Not Maria. Not Josh or Jonah. Not Lily. None of the 5 children I had raised, taught, protected, and loved were mine. I sank onto the living room couch, the world swirling around me. I stared blankly at the family photos lining the mantel. There we were at Christmas, me holding Jonah up to put the star on the tree. There was one from Maria's wedding, I had walked her down the aisle. Me in the hospital room, cradling Lily for the first time. Had it all been a lie? The memories were real. The love, the joy, the pain, I felt those things. I lived them, but now they felt stolen, tarnished. I sat there for over an hour. Maybe longer. The letter stayed in my lap, the words seared into my brain. I couldn't stop thinking of each of my children. Their smiles, their quirks, the things that made them uniquely ours. And then Linda came home. I heard the garage door rumble open. Her keys jingled in the lock. Her familiar footsteps approached the kitchen. "John," she called, setting down grocery bags. "Did you have lunch yet?" I couldn't speak. I just stood in the doorway, holding the letter in my trembling hand. She turned and froze the moment she saw me. Her eyes went to the envelope. Then the letter. The color drained from her face. "You found it. Is it true?" I asked. My voice was hoarse. "Tell me it's not true." She didn't answer immediately. Her hand went to her mouth. She closed her eyes, swaying slightly, as if she'd waited for this moment her entire life and dreaded it every day. John, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I felt like the air had been knocked from my lungs. How long? She stepped forward, her voice shaking. I was young. It started before David was born. I didn't mean for it to happen more than once. But then, I got scared. I didn't know how to stop. I knew if I told you, you'd leave me. I couldn't bear the thought. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. So instead, you let me raise 5 kids thinking they were mine. You let me give my entire life to a lie. They're not a lie, she said, tears now streaming down her face. You are their father in every way that matters. No, I snapped. You don't get to say that. Not now. I turned away from her, the letter crushed in my hand. She tried to touch my arm, but I pulled away. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. Images of my children flashed behind my eyes. Their first words, their school plays, late-night talks about heartbreak, college decisions, life. How could none of it be real? By morning, something inside me had shifted. I needed answers. I needed to know the truth, not just from Linda, but from science. From DNA. I wanted to believe that at least one of them was mine. Just one. Because if even one thread of our tapestry was real, maybe I could hold on to that. But somewhere deep down, I already knew the answer. And it was going to break me. The morning after reading the letter, I sat in my truck outside the house for nearly an hour, unsure where to go, or even who I was anymore. The sunrise was painting the world gold, but I felt gray inside. I didn't know how to face Linda again. I didn't know how to look her in the eye without seeing betrayal layered into every memory. Eventually, I drove. Not to work, not to the store, just drove. I needed motion, even if I had no direction. The hum of the engine and the blur of the streets gave my mind something to cling to. I ended up at the park. The one where I used to take David and Maria when they were little. We used to bring bread crusts to feed the duck. I could still hear their laughter, the squeaky swings, Linda's voice calling after them with that soft, maternal edge. I sat on a bench and just stared at the pond, the letter folded in my coat pocket like a bomb I hadn't defused. Was our marriage a complete lie? No, it couldn't have been. I loved Linda deeply. And I believed she had loved me. But the betrayal. It colored everything now. When I came home, she was waiting for me at the kitchen table, eyes swollen, a cup of tea untouched before her. John, she said, standing as I entered. Please, sit. Let me explain. I hesitated but sat across from her. I wanted answers. She looked down at her hands before speaking. I was 23 when we got married. You were everything I'd ever wanted, stable, kind, gentle. But I was insecure. I didn't believe I deserved you. And I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, early in our marriage. Was David the result? I asked bluntly. She nodded slowly. Yes. But I didn't know for sure. And then, it happened again. A few years later. The pattern repeated. I hated myself for it. I kept trying to be better, to stop. But by then, I had convinced myself that the truth would destroy us both. Her voice cracked. I loved you. I love you still. And yet you lied. 4 decades. I know, she whispered. I carry that every day. You didn't deserve it. But the children, they deserved a father. And you were more of a father than anyone could have been. I stood, pacing. Don't you get it? You took away my choice. You let me build a life on something false. Every birthday party, every lullaby, every scraped knee, I gave it my all because I thought they were mine. My blood. My responsibility. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't have any left in me. I just wanted to protect what we had, she said. But you burned it down in the process, I replied. I slept in the guest room again that night. The following days were a blur. I avoided phone calls from the kids. I couldn't bear to hear their voices, not until I knew the full truth. Not until I confirmed what Linda had told me. So I scheduled DNA tests for all 5 children. I told Linda not to interfere. Let them think it's a health screening, I said. I don't care how you explain it. I just need to know. Linda agreed, numb and defeated. A week later, the samples were in. And the waiting began. In that time, I found myself doing something odd. I started watching home videos. Tapes from the old camcorder we used to lug to every school play and Christmas morning. I watched baby David cooing in a diaper, trying to pull off my glasses. Maria dressed as a lion for Halloween, roaring through the living room. The twins fighting over Lego bricks, and Lily curled up asleep on my chest. I watched them all, knowing what I knew now. Trying to find signs. Was there something in their eyes? Some hint that they weren't mine? But all I saw was love. Their little arms reaching for me. The way they called me Daddy. The way I looked at them, God, the way I smiled. Could love like that be fake? When the test results came, they came all at once. 5 sealed envelopes. My hands shook as I opened each one. Each one confirmed what Linda had said. 0 biological relation. 0. I stared at the papers in silence for a long time. Then I tore them up. I don't know what I expected. Relief? Rage? Closure? I felt none of those things. I just felt empty. The house was quiet that night. Linda had gone to stay with her sister for a few days, giving me space. I sat alone at the dinner table, a plate of untouched food before me, and wondered what would come next. Was I still a father? Did the last 40 years mean anything now? Was my life real? A knock on the door startled me. It was Lily. She held a small container of soup and wore that look she always did when something was wrong, eyebrows pinched, mouth slightly parted. My heart ached just looking at her. "Mom said you weren't feeling well," she said. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, but stepped aside. She walked in, set the soup down, and looked around. "Dad, what's going on?" I said nothing. She noticed the crumpled envelopes on the counter. Picked one up, opened it. Her hands froze. Her breath caught. "You're my dad," she said firmly. "I don't care what a piece of paper says. You're the man who raised me. The man who loved me. That's what matters." I held her tightly and cried for the first time in days. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was the beginning of healing. The morning after Lily's visit, I sat at the kitchen table holding the torn DNA report. I had no intention of taping them back together. I didn't need to see them again. My mind had etched every word, every percentage, into memory. 0% every single one. 5 times over. Still, Lily's words rang in my ears. "You're my dad." That phrase should have given me solace. It did. For a few minutes. But the weight of betrayal had not lifted. I felt like an imposter in my own life. I had spent 40 years being dad, coach, protector, counselor, the man whose name was written on emergency contact forms and birthday card. Now I wasn't sure if I even had the right to that title. I looked over at the framed photo from our trip to Yosemite. All of us standing under a giant sequoia, arms wrapped around each other, my smile the biggest of all. A perfect moment, but now it felt hollow. Later that day, I called my old friend Harold. We'd served together in the army, and even after all these years, he was the only person I trusted with the raw version of Missile. "You sound like someone buried a part of you," he said after I told him everything. "Gee. Feels that way," I said. "I don't even know who I am anymore." There was a pause on the line. "John, you are who you've always been. You didn't lie. You didn't run. You showed up every damn day. That's more than a lot of fathers can say. Hell, that's more than my old man ever did." His words hit me hard. Was being a father about DNA or devotion? Still, I couldn't shake the unease. I didn't tell the other kids yet. I wasn't ready, and I didn't know how. I couldn't just call them and say, "Hey, just a heads up, you're not mine." At least not genetically. It wasn't that simple. So I decided to visit them. One by one. Maybe they deserved to hear the truth from me, face to face. Maria was first. She lived 2 hours away in a small town just past the state line. Her husband, Tom, was out of town on a business trip when I arrived. She welcomed me with open arms, her 2 kids running around her legs like squirrel. "Dad, what a surprise. Come in, come in." I sat at her kitchen table while she brewed tea, catching glimpses of family life I hadn't seen in years. Maria's home was warm, loud, and chaotic, just like her childhood had been. She had always been the emotional one, the heart of our household. "I need to talk to you about something," I said, once the kids were in the other room. She tilted her head. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then handed her a letter I had written. Not Linda's letter, the one I wrote. One that explained everything in my words. She read it slowly. I watched every twitch of her brow, every tremor in her hand. When she finished, she looked at me with glistening eyes. You knew, I said. Didn't you? She nodded slightly. I didn't want to believe it, but I always suspected. We don't look anything alike, you and me. And Mom. Well, I saw the way she looked at other men sometimes, but I never brought it up, because I knew who you were. And who is that? You're my dad, she said. You're the one who taught me to drive, who danced with me at prom, who stayed up all night helping me write that terrible college essay. None of that changes now. The dam broke. We cried together, then hugged like we hadn't hugged in years. And for a moment I felt like a father again. I left Maria's house with a strange mix of sadness and relief. Her acceptance had cracked something open inside me. A part of me started to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything I'd built wasn't lost. But the road ahead was still long, and the next visit was the one I feared most. David. My firstborn. The one who looked up to me for everything. We had always shared a special bond, fishing trips, late-night talks, his college applications, job interviews. I helped him build his first treehouse and stood in the front row when he opened his own law firm. But David was also the most guarded, the most principled, and I worried that the truth would strike him deeper than the others. I drove up to New York City the following weekend. He lived in a sleek apartment on the Upper West Side, modern, spotless, and filled with success. Dad, he said, surprised but happy when I showed up. What are you doing here? I needed to talk. In person. He poured us both a glass of bourbon, then sat down across from me, all ears. I handed him my letter. He read it slowly, methodically, as if he were cross-examining each word. When he was done, he didn't speak. He stood, walked to the window, and just stared out at the skyline. David. You're not my father? He asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I raised you, I said. From the moment you were born. He turned, pain written across his face. You were everything to me. My hero. My anchor. And now I don't even know who I am. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't know either. Not until recently. He nodded, swallowed hard, and sat again. I need time, he said. I understand. And he walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my bourbon and a silence thicker than grief. The drive to see Josh and Jonah was the longest yet, not in distance, but in emotional weight. The twins had always been a package deal, different personalities but inseparable souls. From childhood through college, they shared everything: rooms, clothes, secrets, and dreams. But would this truth tear them apart, or bring them closer? They now lived 2 hours apart, but when I called and asked to meet, they agreed without hesitation. We chose a familiar spot, a lakeside cabin we used to visit every summer. It was quiet there, just the breeze in the trees and the sound of water lapping gently at the dock. I arrived first. The scent of pine and damp wood pulled at my memories like loose threads. I stood at the edge of the dock, looking out, when I heard them arrive, laughing like boys again. It almost made me forget what I was about to tell them. Dad! Josh called. You beat us here for once. Had to get the good chairs, I said, managing a smile. We settled around a fire pit, cracking open beers like old times. I let the warmth and nostalgia linger for a while. But eventually, I reached into my coat and pulled out the 2 letters. Boys. I need to tell you something serious. Something that's changed my life. They looked at me concerned. I handed them each an envelope. They read in silence. The fire cracked, the lake rippled, and my heart nearly exploded waiting for their reactions. Jonah was the first to speak. So, you're not our biological father. I nodded slowly. That's what the tests say. Josh leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the fire. Did Mom know? Yes. She kept it from all of us. A heavy silence fell. Jonah stood, walked a few paces, then turned to me. But who taught us to swim? Who carried me on his back when I broke my leg? Who drove 5 hours to pick me up when I got stranded freshman year? That was you. His voice broke on the last word. Josh nodded. You're our dad, no matter what biology says. I mean, look at this place. Every memory I have that means anything, you're in it. I didn't realize I was crying until Jonah pulled me into a hug. Then Josh joined. We stood there, the three of us, under a canopy of stars and decades of shared love, holding on like the truth might try to blow us apart. But it didn't. We stayed that way for a long time. And for the first time since finding Linda's letter, I felt more than sadness. I felt seen. I felt understood. I felt like their father. Lily had always been different from the others. More intuitive. More sensitive to emotions, especially mine. While the other kids were louder, more boisterous, Lily was gentle, thoughtful. She would sit on the front porch with me in silence, and somehow make it feel like a deep conversation. I knew talking to her would be the hardest, not because she'd lash out, but because she wouldn't. She'd love me anyway. And that kind of grace was harder to receive than anger. When I called and asked if I could come over, she said yes without hesitation. I already know, she added softly. You do? I could tell something was wrong. You've sounded hollow lately. Mom hasn't been herself either. I drove to her small house on the outskirts of town. She lived alone, teaching elementary school, spending her evenings painting and feeding stray cats in the neighborhood. Lily was, and always had been, the kindest soul I knew. When I pulled up, she was waiting on the porch, a blanket around her shoulders and 2 cups of tea in hand. I figured we'd need warmth, she said. We sat without speaking for a moment. I wanted to be the one to tell you, I finally said. But it seems your heart already knew. She nodded. I read the letter, Dad. The one Mom wrote. I tensed. I didn't mean for you to find it. I know. But I'm glad I did. I looked at her, unsure of how to respond. She placed her tea down and reached for my hand. I don't need DNA to tell me who my father is. You're the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who held me when I had the flu, who waited outside every dance class, rain or shine. That's what matters to me. My throat tightened. I wanted to protect you, I said. From the truth. From the pain. You didn't need to protect me from love, she whispered. I couldn't stop the tears this time. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder like she used to do as a little girl. Whatever happens between you and Mom, she said, just know that nothing will ever change how much I love you. In that quiet night air, I realized something important. Lily didn't just offer forgiveness. She offered healing. And in that moment, I let it in. After seeing all 5 children, my heart felt both shattered and held. Each encounter peeled back layers of pain I hadn't realized I was carrying. But there was one relationship that still loomed like a shadow across it all, Linda. We hadn't spoken more than a few words since she left to stay with her sister. No texts, no calls. I didn't know if I missed her, or just missed the idea of us, the version I thought we were. But I needed closure. We both did. So one Sunday morning, I called her. She answered on the second ring. John. Can we talk? A pause. Yes. Come over whenever you're ready. When I arrived, she looked smaller. Not physically, but somehow less like the woman I'd known. Her eyes were tired, her smile hesitant. The apartment smelled like lavender and loneliness. We sat across from each other in the living room. I've talked to the kids, I began. I know, she said quietly. They've called me too. I'm glad you told them. Did you ever plan to? She shook her head slowly. I was too afraid. I knew the truth would destroy everything. It nearly did, I said. But not in the way you think. Not because of the children. Because of the silence. She nodded, eyes wet. I still love you, she said. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I needed you to know that. I swallowed hard. I believe you, I said. And I'll always care about you. But what we had. It doesn't live here anymore. She wiped a tear away. I know. There was no shouting. No accusations. Just 2 people sitting in the ruins of what they built, acknowledging it couldn't be rebuilt the same way. We talked for hours about the past, the good, the bad, the in-between. And when I left, we hugged. Not out of obligation, but respect. A closing of a chapter. Some endings don't come with fanfare. Just a quiet recognition that the road has forked, and it's time to walk alone. After my final conversation with Linda, something shifted inside me. For the first time since reading her letter, I wasn't drowning. The grief was still there, but it no longer felt like it was going to swallow me whole. I had survived the storm. Now I had to figure out how to live in the aftermath. I returned home and walked into a house that no longer felt haunted. The silence didn't scream anymore, it whispered. The photos on the walls didn't hurt, they reminded me. I started going through old boxes in the attic. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I needed to remember everything on my terms. Baby shoes, school projects, Father's Day cards with stick figure drawings and I love you, Daddy scribbled in crayon. Each item felt like a vote of confidence from the past. Proof that whatever the biology said, the love had been real. In the weeks that followed, I began writing. Journaling, mostly. But eventually, I started piecing together a memoir. Not for publication. Not even for the kids. Just for me. I needed to find the narrative in the chaos. I needed to reclaim the identity that had been torn apart. And through it all, the kids showed up. David, slowly but surely, started calling again. He never mentioned the letter, but his voice softened. One evening, he asked if I could come visit and meet his newborn son. He has your eyes, he said quietly. Even if it's not genetic. It feels like it. Maria began inviting me to family dinners again. Josh and Jonah came by on weekends, sometimes with their kids. And Lily, she was around almost every day. Helping with the garden. Repainting the living room. Just being there. They were no longer just visiting their childhood home. They were choosing to come home. And I was choosing to be their father again, without question, without fear. Because love isn't defined by blood. It's built in the moments we choose to stay.